Near mint condition, the home of collected edition.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. It is Tuesday, all you minties. That means it's time to take an advanced look at all of these collected editions coming out from Marvel Comics this week. It's a short week, but today we're looking at books coming out the week of November 18th or 19th, depending on where you get your books. So let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. Before going any further, a big thank you to the folks at Marvel Comics for sending us copies of these books. As I mentioned earlier, these books are due out in the direct market and book market on November 18th or 19th, depending on where you get your books. What we are looking at here are a small batch of books. It's been a while since Marvel has released a small batch of books like this. Normally, it's like 5 to 6 titles, sometimes 9 to 10. But today it's 3, but these 3 are solid, and the pick of the week is going to be so difficult. Now, keep in mind, I do overviews of Omnis ahead of time, so they came out last week for the books coming out this week. But we have Aliens, The Original Years, Epic Collection, Volume 3. We've got Ghost Rider, the Marvel Masterworks, Volume 7. And then the latest modern era Epic Collection, and we are looking at Spider-Girl. So I do put timestamps in the description of the video. And don't forget to smash that like button. I guess that's it. Let's go ahead and start this time around with Aliens, The Original Years, Epic Collection, Volume 3. No, we are not. We are actually going to kick it off with the spines of the books. Didn't want to miss out on that, just in case I didn't show them as I'm showing each book individually. Okay, now let's go ahead and start with the Aliens Epic Collection. Okay, now we can start with the actual Aliens Epic Collection, The Original Years, Volume 3, 1992 to 1994. And this has a lot of different creators like Stephen Grant and John Byrne, Peter Milligan, Christopher Taylor, and Paul Johnson, Dave Johnson, and Killian Plunkett, and inkers like David Roach, and John Byrne, of course, inking his own stuff, Mark McKenna, Tony Harris, colors like Matt Webb, Alex Wallow, and letters like Jim Mazzara and Clem Robbins. Here is the table of contents telling you where you're going to find each and every one of these particular issues and where they originated from and what year they came out. Collected in here is the Alien 3 adaptation, all 3 issues of that miniseries, the Alien Space Marines issues 1 through 12, Aliens Rogue 1 through 4, Aliens Labyrinth 1 through 4, and material from Dark Horse Comics Presents 3 through 5, 11 through 13, Previews 1 through 12, Previews 1, and Aliens Magazine 9 through 12. The book has a total of 472 pages, retailing for $54.99. So we kick it off with this adaptation of Alien 3. Now, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie, but it is a pretty straightforward adaptation of not the director's cut, but the regular edition. So, something to keep in mind is that this is just the regular cut, where Ripley, after Aliens, finds herself alone on this planet, or this, it's a prison of just men, and she knows that the xenomorph is out there. What happened to Hicks? What happened to Newt? Well, if you haven't seen the movie, and if you haven't read the book, I will let you find out for yourself. And immediately, as soon as she lands, one of the dogs that one of the prisoners has a scar on his face, almost like a face hugger had been on it. But we don't see that. Or, I'm sorry, we see that. Ripley doesn't. So Ripley decides to join this band of prisoners until she can get rescued. And what happens? Well, a xenomorph breaks loose. It's only 3 issues, and it is a pretty straightforward adaptation. Nothing really left to the imagination or expanding on part of the story. The really cool thing that's collected in here, by the way, this was collected in Omnibus Volume 2. Most of the stories in here is the Alien Space Marine stories. This is really cool because even though Aliens and of course Predator during this time, was published exclusively by Dark Horse Comics. The Space Marines mini comics were part of the, I think it was Kenner toy line. So the Kenner toys came with these little mini comics to kind of get to know some of these characters. It had really nothing to do with the video game. That one was the video game, 1994, I think, Alien vs. Predator or Alien 3. But it was just like a storyline that they added here from Desert Storm. What was it called? Fireball. But it was only 12 issues. And then we jump into the Dark Horse Comics issues 3 through 5. This is the one that's written by Sarah Beam, and David Roach is the artist. And it primarily focuses on the character of, I think her name is Robin, who keeps having these nightmares. And the xenomorphs are part of it, but so are other kind of attacks in here, like perhaps coming from a shark or other predators. Then we get to this right here. This is really interesting because this is John Byrne in a classic Next Man type of art style that he developed. So it was after his run on She-Hulk, Sensational She-Hulk, that he started doing his own creator-owned stuff. But this is, of course, a evolved form of the xenomorph attacking a group of Earthlings here in a different timeline. We're looking at the 50s. And it's really cool just to see a creator like John Byrne take on a challenge like drawing xenomorphs. And then we have more of the Aliens magazine. Another group of characters here. This one's pretty straightforward. And this one collection here does have a lot of just different little short stories. Some of them are great. Some of them stand out. This is Aliens Rogue. So now we have an mini-series. And Aliens Rogue, I think this is the one that, what years were this? 93 to 94, I think? No, 92. This one, I think, came out in 93, or at least if I remember at the very beginning. It's a 4-issue miniseries, and this all focuses on a corporate, almost like a super spy, Mr. Cray. And heading a group of characters on a reconnaissance mission. And of course, who else gets involved are the xenomorphs, because nothing is ever easy in space and no one can hear you scream. This is written by Ian Edgington, and Will Simpson does the artwork for these particular issues. And then we get into the next miniseries, more of the Dark Horse Comics. Again, little short stories here from the Facehugger's perspective. And this one here is Backsplash. This is by Killian Plunkett. The artwork in here is solid. And then we get into Labyrinth. Labyrinth is the other miniseries here. This is all about Dr. Church, who's studying the behavior of aliens. A lot of these stories may seem similar because it's different writers' takes on the characters, and it may seem repetitive from time to time, but I still enjoy them. Anytime, my daughter and I just went to see, what was it, Predator Badlands, and we really enjoyed it. Even though we think, we've seen every Predator story you can tell, including the comics. But no, it's just unique little twists and turns that happens, and that's what we enjoy about just different writers and artists' interpretations of these stories. But yes, this is another one that's 4 issues, and basically it's all about how the aliens behave, and then what ends up happening, because even though this particular station has taken precaution and has been shielded up, and there's no chance of risk, you can probably guess what ends up happening. There are characters that appear in this story that were found in those, what was it, Dark Horse Comics, issues 12 and 13. This one has a very unique xenomorph too. And as you can see here, it's walking around on like mix of biomechanical legs. But again, it's a lot of scientific experiments done on the xenomorphs and what could happen to them, and relating to humans. Now, I think that's the last story that's collected in here. And then the rest of these are covers to the trade paperbacks. And you have an introduction here by S.D. Perry. Pinups. I really like Killian Plunkett's art. I may have said that. I never go back and rewatch my video, so I may have already said that when I did an overview of the Omnibus Volume 2. That is the only one that is out of print right now. So for people that don't know, this is the standard edition cover of Volume 2. This book has a total of 472 pages, retailing for $54.99. Mayday Parker is back. Spider-Girl Modern Era Epic Collection Volume 6, the 2005 to 2006 years. The Falco friends, Olif and Lim. And who's that familiar looking character? This one is called Family Ties. Yep, Tom DeFalco, Ron Friends, Pat O'Leaf, Sal Buscema, Scott Koblish, and Gotham with Digital Rainbow are the colorists with Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and Gotham. And then you have the Spider-Man family. That one is written by Tom DeFalco and drawn by Ron Lim with Norm Ratman on art or colors. Collected in here is Spider-Girl issues 85 through 100 and Spider Family number 1. This book has a total of 400 pages, retailing for $49.99. And this is the return of Mayday Parker. Piker. Why did I say Piker? And Funny Face is back, making an attack at the hospital here after some things went down in the previous issues. This actually works as an ending of Spider-Girl because it went to issue 100, but there will be more epic modern era epic collections because the series continued. Not as 101, but it was relaunched. Now, there are little interludes here for Last Hero Standing, like this young lady right here, Rena Logan, who is part of the M2. Every time I forget that Spider-Girl started off as a what-if comic, and then there was this whole M2 universe, like the Avengers, I'm reminded with stories like that in the Fantastic Five. So she officially joins the Fantastic Five when they are joining forces to go and try to find what happened to Sue Richards. And we have the appearance of the Omega Scroll through here. But she ends up replacing one of the Fantastic Five through these pages. And that's why it's called Family Business. And it's really cool to see Tom DeFalco writing the stories because he was writing the stories of the Fantastic Four during this time. And this is where she confronts this guy. This is Sandra. And she ends up confronting this guy named Howard, who beats Sandra. Man, these stories were so ahead of their time for a character that I know takes place in the future. We have the return of Misery. And then perhaps the Girl Spider. This is the one-shot Spider Family that has her teaming up. Long before there was talk of a Spider-Verse, there was this comic right here. There's Peter Parker, and of course married to Mary Jane. But here's where she meets Araña. Here's where she meets a couple of other characters that you may be familiar with. And it kind of ties it in to the issues of Spider-Girl that immediately follow it. So like just issues 91 and I think a little bit of 92 before we get to the return of another big character. These are the Avengers during this time. So yes, you have J2 and you've got the Wasp, and I'll talk more about them later. This is perhaps the return of Magneto, but how in the world is this guy still alive? And we are introduced to a new mutant that I thought was Kitty Pryde at first, but this is a young mutant calling herself Push. So you can probably guess what her powers are. Now, I guess spoilers in case. I know I've talked about this before, and we are 100 issues in just about with these stories. So just in case, yeah. You have the character of the Green Goblin. During this time, the Green Goblin is Phil Urich. And you've got the return of Venom. Now, Venom, the Venom symbiote, is attached to someone that May knows. So Mayday Parker, sorry, that's what I keep calling her. May knows who the symbiote is attached to during these issues. And then again, you have the Avengers. So you've got characters like Stinger and J2, and what's another one? Mainframe. And the return of this guy right here, the Scryer. If you remember the storyline that is called the Clone Saga, You may be familiar with that character, but is he the true Scryer or is he someone else? Now, this guy right here that I was like, oh my gosh, this is a tie-in the Meteor Man. Nope. I forgot that he is somebody that we all know and love. Well, most of us. And he gets different powers through here. Because I haven't read these issues in years. I think I originally read them when I came back to comics. My buddy Shaka had the entire run. And I was like, yeah, I'll read Spider-Girl. I know who Spider-Girl is. And at least the way he pitched it to me, he was like, look, it was supposed to be the baby that survived during the whole clone saga. But anyway, if you have not read these are some great stories. Really, really like a throwback to that classic era of Spider-Man that people really enjoy, including myself. That's why these really stand out. So, the Hobgoblin. This is the return of the classic Hobgoblin. But how can that be? If she's already fighting against Phil Urich over here as the Green Goblin, but aren't they friends? Who is this Hobgoblin that has shown up through these pages? Apparently, it's the real Hobgoblin, the original Hobgoblin. And if you don't know who that is, because you've been reading comics and you haven't gotten to the end of Roger Stern's run, it is explained through here in case you're not familiar with them. And then, of course, the Return of the Scryer and the Brotherhood of the Scryers. But we also have a huge cast of supporting characters. You know, I talked about Phil Urich, and I talked a little bit about... No, I didn't even talk about who the character of Venom was. Okay, but you've got characters in here like... Christy Watson. You've got characters like Moose and Arthur and the Black Tarantula. Characters that have appeared, and at first they seemed like they were nemesis, and then somehow with the power of friendship she was able to defeat them. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's kind of true. You've got Raptor. You've got a new Felicia Hardy, or I'm sorry, new Black Cat, Felicity Hardy. Some of them are legacy characters, and then others are brand new characters to this line. But yeah, she has a huge amount of supporting cast members. And I love this homage cover. But this ends with issue number 100, where she is donning the black outfit. She is fighting against not only the original Hobgoblin, but a bunch of Scryers. Who exactly are they? And what in the hell does all of this lead into? And... there's also the return of a character that goes by the name of Kane that might have something to do with the Scryers showing up, the Brotherhood of the Scryers. And that's all I will say about the series. In the back, you do have some extras, like the Rogue Gallery here, the Omega Scroll Fury, and Hobgoblin Misery, the Scryers, Spiral, Venom. I love the first appearance of Venom is in Amazing Spider-Man 299. Raptor. I mentioned Raptor as one of the supporting cast. And then original art by Ron Frenz and Sal Buscema. And other modern era epic collections. This is it. This book is the one that gets my seal of approval. I absolutely love this series. I hope that Marvel continues with it and gives us, what do we need? Volumes 2 and 3 of the complete collections just redone as modern era epic collections, and then a continuation of the series. Last but certainly not least is the latest Marvel Masterworks, Ghost Rider Volume 7. Hashtag Save the Masterworks. The end of Ghost Rider. That's right. This is... at least this one here wraps up Ghost Rider, the series, because... well, the Johnny Blaze era. So let's open it up. Again, those beautiful end sheets from Marvel Masterworks, Volume 7, what it collects, and the credits written by J.M. DeMatteis with Bob Budiansky and Don Perlin, and unknown as Tina... oh my gosh, Creo Proces, and Peter Gillis, Stephen Grant, Michael Fleischer, and penciled by Bob Budiansky, Don Perlin, Greg LaRocque. And inks right here by Dave Simmons and others, and lettering by Joe Rosen, Jim Novak, and Diana Albers, colors Bob Sharon and Andy Yankees and Tom Vincent. Table of contents telling you where you're going to find each of these issues and when they originally came out. And no, you're not seeing things. This is something really cool. You're jumping from 1982 to 1992. I may have said that right. And then going back to 1982. Why? I'll explain why in a little bit. And then this wonderful introduction by J.M. DeMatteis talking about how he took the job of writing Ghost Rider, but he wasn't a fan. And then he immediately became a fan. Once he was put there working with Bob Budiansky, and they were asking each other questions about what makes Ghost Rider work, it became Kismet. Collected in here is Ghost Rider 74 to 81, Marvel Superheroes number 11, The Defenders 145, and material from What If 17 and 28, and Defenders 146. This book has a total of 304 pages and retails for $75. And we kick it off with both Bob Budiansky and J.M. DeMatteis as co-plotters of these particular stories. So in here we get to see this character of Centurius showing up through here. And he's a character that, if you read Marvel Comics for a while, he still comes around from time to time. And he plays a big, important part through here. But he is making his official first appearance in issue 74 here. And then we get this. So, what happens is that in this story, we have the character of Johnny Blaze. He's still kind of fighting off against Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider accidentally hurting one of the people from the Quentin Carnival, and the huge cast of the Quentin Carnival is back. So Johnny Blaze escapes. Like, he leaves and he meets these people, and that's where he ends up running into Centurius, who is hypnotizing people to work for him, and he wants something else. Now, the character of Red Fowler goes after him, trying to find Johnny, and he eventually does, and it succeeds. This is really cool because they go riding off after this big adventure, after this mansion that Centurius has. They ride off, both Red and Ghost Rider, or Johnny Blaze. This story right here was kept in the vault in 1982, and they never used it. But it is takes place before issue number 80. So you have Red Fowler here and Johnny Blaze riding like they just left issue number 74. That is so cool. This is a story about how they just run into this little town and get arrested because they were speeding. And then they end up meeting this guy right here, who is Reverend Stryker. Weird, because I had just read God Loves Man Kills. That must have been a very popular name for preachers and reverends back then. Anyway, not everything as it seems with that guy. And then we get to meet this new character named Steel Wind, who could be stealing the show back at the Quentin Carnival. But she's a little bit more menacing than she first appears. As a matter of fact, she could have some demonic traits. Something's off with this girl. Then we get into these issues right here, which is almost like a trilogy or quadrilogy, where Mephisto finally gets involved. So you also have characters like Ralph Quentin, who's the owner of the Quentin Carnival, of course, and Cynthia Randolph and Johnny Blaze. But then you start getting more into the darker side of things. So again, during this time, Johnny Blaze is fighting off the Ghost Rider persona, trying to separate himself from Ghost Rider. We didn't really have a name for the demon up until these collections here. So Zarathos finally gets a name through these pages here. Of course, it's the same demonic force that took over Johnny Blaze. It's the same character that made his first appearance in the Marvel Spotlight number 5. But we didn't really have a name. So Bob Budiansky and, of course, J.M. DeMatteis came up with a name. And now both Zarathos and Johnny Blaze are fighting, or racing maybe, to take over the body of Johnny Blaze. It becomes a really confusing but awesome storyline, which makes sense, right? Why would this demon not want to take over this body so he can come back to Earth? And all the people that he's met, he can manipulate and use. Like, then I think this one has the Great Vincento. And we run into Nightmare. And eventually they maybe get separated. Like, Johnny Blaze actually gets his wish. And we do get a returning character through here. There's the Great Vincento. And we make it back to the Quentin Carnival, where Johnny Blaze perhaps has successfully separated himself from none other than Zarathos. As mentioned, there are some returning characters here, and one in particular that I wanted to talk about, and that is this young lady here, Roxanne Simpson. They finally get reunited. They hadn't seen each other for a while, but now Roxanne and Johnny are finally reunited in these very pages. There is another character that shows up through here named the Sin Eater, not to be confused with the Sin Eater from Spectacular Spider-Man or The Death of Jean DeWolf. It is a different type of character. But all of this leads into the final issue number 81. And I will say, like, in comics, whenever we talk about comics, or whenever I do, and people ask me, what's a good reading order, most comics continue, right? Like, the stories continue. This actually does feel like it's got a definitive ending. The ending of issue 81 actually feels like, oh, that's it for Johnny Blaze and Zarathos. No more Ghost Rider. Like, it legit ends. It doesn't end on a cliffhanger. The book was getting canceled because of sales, but J.M. DeMatteis was able to wrap up everything. So you get everything in here. Nightmare, Mephisto, the Freak Master. Who did I mention earlier? Oh, yeah, the Sin Eater. And you have Johnny Blaze and Roxanne. And what happens to, of course, the circus and all of his friends. Or the carnival, sorry, the Quentin Carnival. So you've got Red Fowler and Ralph Quentin and Great Vincenzo and Corky. What happens to all these people? Well, I swear, it's actually got a good, bookend to everything that happened previously. Now, after that big finale of issue 81, the next place we see Johnny Blaze and Roxanne are in the pages of the Defenders. Those are a full issue and part of an issue that are collected here. And it was a couple of years later, because I want to say that Ghost Rider ended around 1983, and I think these issues took place in 1985. So it was a couple of years later that we see Ghost Rider, or Johnny Blaze, and his girlfriend Roxanne riding towards the Defenders headquarters and getting involved with the Defenders. And then after that, we get the What If issues. What if, of course, Ghost Rider were villains? So it's not going to collect everything, but just the Ghost Rider part. And it's not the only Ghost Rider story, because we also get what if Ghost Rider were separated from Johnny Blaze. Hey, spoilers! That might have already happened. I love what if stories, especially older ones, that actually happened in the 616 universe. And then we have, of course, the extras. The farewell editorial by J.M. DeMatteis, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, and including characters like the Phantom Rider, who later becomes the Ghost Rider. No, he appeared as Ghost Rider and then became the Phantom Rider. Reprints right here. So you have Bob Budiansky covers. And then the original art. This is Ghost Rider 75 cover. The background steel wind image was illustrated on a separate artboard, while the foreground figures were duped to a photostat overlay. This approach allowed for the background to be shot to print film by the engraves in a fashion that captured the tonal value in Bob Budiansky and Dave Simmons' artwork. Dang, I gotta go back to that issue 75. Let's see. And wow, that is really solid. I love these tricks that they would use. Yeah, honestly, I would have thought that this was all done in one sheet, but it's really cool to see that collected back here. The original cover to issue 77, original internal artwork, and then, of course, the biographies on these creators like J.M. DeMatteis, Bob Budiansky, Michael Fleischer, Peter Gillis, Stephen Grant, Carmine Infantino, Greg LaRocque, who actually did that 90s comic, the comic from the 80s that was printed in the 90s, Don Perlin and Tom Sutton. Now, this book, this masterwork, just like all the other masterwork, is sewn binding and has a total of 304 pages printed in this thick, glossy paper stock at the Donnelly printer. Retails for $75. And that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing any of these books, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was my overview of this week's books. In the comments down below, let me know what you are picking up. And hashtag save the Masterworks. I hope they return one day. I know there are a lot of people that are looking forward to more of the Walter Simonson Thor. And of course, getting more X-Men and more Spider-Man in Epic Collection and all the other books. But at least Ghost Rider wrapped up for Johnny Blaze's era. That's it, everybody. Smash that like button on the way out. Stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.